Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Kellyanne Bauer, Chief Marketing Officer for dentsu. I specifically focus on global technology alliances. And on behalf of the entire dentsu team, I want to thank you for your time for joining us today. We're super excited. This is the first ever Rewind Live series. For today's session, we're going to provide dentsu's POV on Adobe Summit. The session is going to consist of 3 segments. The first segment is going to be an exclusive interview between our very own Jackie Kelly, President of the Americas at Dentsu Aegis Network, and Ann Lunis, the CMO of Adobe. The second segment is going to consist of Dentsu experts in a panel format. We're going to give our point of view on the key tracks coming out of this year's summit. And just as a note, those key tracks include innovation, data and identity, content, customer journeys, commerce, and then we're going to close it up with what we call B2Me. Following the panelist discussion, we're going to open it up to you all for a live Q&A. And so once that panelist segment starts, you're welcome to start typing in your questions in the Q&A function on the Zoom panel at the bottom. And we will get to those as much as we possibly can. As a reminder, this is a live session. We're all broadcasting from our home offices, so please bear with us with any technical difficulties. We will offer today's session on demand, and we'll share some details on that coming at the end of the session and then in follow-up communications. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and tune in Jackie and
all right,
Ann.
You ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So Ann, thank you so much for joining. I know many people missed you at the Adobe Summit, the virtual version of the Adobe Summit. So this will be our opportunity to visit with you, and grateful that you were able to make the time.
Thank you for having me. This is fun.
First up, I would love to hear from you on how you were finding ways to thrive in this new normal.
It's been interesting for me because I have never worked from home before. At Adobe, our policy really is not to work from home. And I have found myself to be extremely productive here, which one would think is not the case. But I've been talking to a lot of my colleagues, not just at Adobe, but at other companies. And there's a theme here. I think all of us are working harder than we've ever worked before, but it's very satisfying to be able to do your job and kind of overcome a lot of the obstacles that are before us. And so I feel extraordinarily productive. On the other hand, I miss, the rapport, even though video conference is my life. I miss that, just in the hallway kind of conversations and, being stuck in one room in front of one kind of camera and the monitor is not ideal.
So one of the things that I think is really exciting about Adobe is the view that you have into so many aspects of the economy and consumer behavior. And I know just this week you launched the Digital Economy Index, and I thought you might be able to tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in that data, what it tells us.
Yeah, so this was a project that we were working on for some time, and it's actually a multi-year project. There's no other company or federal agency that does a consumer spending index online, which is remarkable. And so we took the task because we're processing trillions of transactions a day with Adobe Analytics, and we have thousands of retailers as our customers. So we have a really good vantage point to understand what's going on in the economy. With COVID, we decided let's do kind of a special component of the study before we introduce it about COVID related purchases over a 3-week period. And as you can imagine, e-commerce is exploding. Over the period, which ended actually March 21st, there was already a 25% surge in overall e-commerce. Certain categories like groceries, 100% increase. Fitness equipment, 55% increase. People are actually buying like dumbbells online.
I can imagine, right?
Medication, people are hoarding medication. People are hoarding, of course, hand sanitizers, you know, toilet paper and the things that you imagine. Some really interesting statistics on geographic behavior. So there are certain states that are, you know, the heavy e-commerce states, California, Oregon, Washington State, Ohio, surprisingly, and New York. And those are the top spenders. And in some of the middle states and some of the southern states, they're at the bottom of the pile. So some really interesting data, and it's been validated by two really prominent economists, one at Stanford, one at the University of Chicago.
That's terrific. And what initially motivated Adobe to invest and launch the index? Obviously prior to COVID.
Yeah, so we have been doing a holiday report every year to predict what holiday shopping will be online. And this is something that's anticipated every year to, you know, figure out what the e-commerce growth is, also what categories are doing well, pricing, sales, and promotions, etc. So that has been going on for a long time. And we decided that we wanted to do a bigger study, and it started off as really a global index to understand deflation, inflation, purchasing behavior at a very large scale. And we weren't going to introduce it right now, but with COVID, we said, let's introduce it. Let's do a COVID component because there's so much change happening in the digital economy. And that's why we launched it.
I think it's going to be super helpful, both for this moment, but also benchmarking against it going forward.
Exactly.
All right, so you launched Vegas to virtual, which I know is a huge undertaking. For those of us who have been to the summit, obviously in your partners and your audience as well. Tell us about what the planning was like and what you learned, both in terms of what is a bit challenging because it's impossible to get the benefit that would have been gained with that many people in one area versus the real benefits that you derive from it.
Yeah, so I looked at the dates, quite frankly, because I wanted to remember when we actually made the decision to pivot from live to a digital summit. So on March 2nd, we announced that we were going to cancel the live Vegas summit. That is literally a month ago. That was plan A. Plan B was to film the whole thing at our San Jose offices. And so we're going to trick the whole place out. We had production crews. Then, of course, we closed all of our offices. So that was plan B. And then plan C, we did not start planning literally until March 11th. And so in 20 days, we created this digital experience. And there are a lot of things that you miss, right? I mean, part of Summit, you know, there's kind of this thrilling vibe of having everyone together. We were expecting over 25,000 people. So there's a camaraderie, a community. You have, you know, celebrities. We were supposed to have Tom Brady and Gwyneth Paltrow. And so
you still have Tom Brady.
Still had Tom Brady. We filmed him the day before the shelter at home.
He was good.
Ridiculous. He was kind of good.
Yeah.
So anyway, you missed that, but I can't believe that my team could pull this off. I mean, honestly, it's an extraordinary achievement. In 3 weeks, we filmed every single thing at home. Shantanu, my boss, Anil Chakrabarti, the head of the Experience Cloud group, 6 other keynotes, Tom Brady, and then 120 breakout sessions, all filmed by the people in their own homes. And then we released the Digital Economy Index. We built an entire web experience using, of course, AEM and Target, of course, analytics to measure all the traffic. We had 300,000 people visit. And 60,000 social conversations, trending on Twitter, some of the most emotional, lovely comments. Thank you so much for having this. I've been coming for over 10 years, and I really appreciated you doing it. So it was just wonderful.
That's great. And it's, how many actually watched it live at the first time it was airing versus just coming back and looking at the content that is still available?
So 120,000 people watched it over the 2-hour period.
That's terrific.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
17,000 people were ready at 8:30 when it opened.
Wow. Well, I will say, I'm not much of a Patriots fan, but I thought Tom Brady did a great job playing off of the notion of a playbook, which I know is a super important aspect of what Adobe delivers, and really making the sports analogy relevant to what CEOs and executive teams are applying to the Adobe Digital Playbook. So I thought he did a great job.
But honestly, he was so, I thought, thoughtful, and the analogy again between, your business life and your professional life on the field, I thought he did a great job.
I did too.
Yeah.
I did too.
And I'm not a Pats fan either.
I guess it doesn't matter anymore, technically, right?
I hope there's football this year.
Me too. Go Cowboys. So I want to shift to education and social impact. So many of our clients are doing incredible things in this moment, whether it be, LVMH and Anheuser-Busch, retooling their factories to produce disinfectant products, or General Motors retooling to create masks. I mean, there's just so many stories of heroism, knowing that brands can really begin to lean in and solve some of this for us as a country. I know that Adobe's done some wonderful things around free software to help the learning that's happening as many of us move to, being homeschooling, which is typical. Tell us a bit about the action, not only that action, but maybe other actions that Adobe's taking in this moment to really support the country, the world.
So education has always been a really important segment for us. And so when we realized that kids would be obviously learning from home, we decided to provision all schools that had Creative Cloud provision to them with at-home licenses for those students. So we have about 40 million students now who have access to Creative Cloud from home if they didn't have it already at their homes. And now the challenge, of course, is to give them stuff to do. So we do with our regular creative community, little lessons and tutorials. So one of our amazing artists did a drawing class this week, and thousands of kids attended because parents are looking for things for their kids to do.
Exactly right. Yeah.
So that's, I would say, one of the most important things that we've done. We've also given, of course, to our local community in San Jose and the Bay Area, to the Global Red Cross. And I think probably one of the best things that we do at Adobe is matching campaigns. So we have a 2-for-1 employee matching campaign for any COVID-related cause, and the goal is 1 million. We're almost there.
Wow.
We'll keep upping the number. So we do a lot. We're a very philanthropic company to begin with.
I know you are.
And so I think this is, it's a time for all of us to kind of step up.
So Anne, this question is one that I always enjoy hearing from people, because there's so few brands who have the opportunity to take the products and services that you deliver and actually apply them to their own business. I call it eating your own dog food. Obviously, Adobe has that ability. Can you tell us about the digital transformation that you've been on as a company for others to learn from?
Yeah, so it really started about 10 years ago. I would say in 2009, we decided to move into an adjacent business, which was the acquisition of Omniture. And we in marketing had been using Omniture for our web analytics. And so we were very excited about this acquisition because we could tell that, the web was going to become a much more significant part of our business. Then we continued to acquire a couple of other companies. And at the same time, we decided that we were going to shift our very successful, highly profitable packaged software business into a subscription business in the cloud. But we saw the writing on the wall. We said recurring revenue is going to be the best model for us moving forward, both for the success of the company, but also the street was really valuing companies that were in the cloud. And so over the course of really probably 5 to 6 years, we transformed every single thing. We started selling direct on our website, so we had to really, improve the capabilities that we had. We used all of the tools that we had bought from these companies. And marketing was really on the front line because we were running the website. We had the most data about our customers. We started doing advanced modeling on mix, attribution. We hired an incredible team. So now I probably have 50 data scientists on my team. And we really, I would say, have very advanced capabilities in terms of our marketing and media return information. And then the whole company shifted. I mean, finance, they were collecting money up front. Now they have to collect it on a monthly basis. IT, we had to build huge infrastructure on multiple platforms. Sales organization, we had a very large channel distribution system. We still have channel distributors, but a lot of that obviously has now moved to the web. And so, I mean, a complete change out.
What do you think if you have customers or partners that are embarking on this journey? What's the advice you give them? And here's the one thing you need to get right before you actually leap in.
I would say, and I'm always careful about how I position this, but I would say technology is just the first step in this. And we sell technology. You have to buy the technology, but the people and process changes far overshadow.
Yeah, it's a cultural change. I noticed that when Shantanu was talking about Adobe's transformation in his keynote during the virtual summit, he had a line that said, "Design for brilliance and wire for intelligence." Mm-hmm. I thought was a beautiful way to articulate the beauty that results from the work that you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the mission of the company has been for a long time, right brain, left brain, you know, wonderful design, but if you don't have wonderful intelligence and data, then, you know, the two really together are incredibly important. And so I think, you know, at Adobe, I have a remarkable creative studio, and not every company should do that. You know, I think for us, it really works because we have a very high bar for our creative, but we have an equally strong data organization, and they work really closely together. Because there's no advertising person who doesn't want the creative to work harder, and there's no data person who doesn't want to help the creative work harder. Yeah. So I think it's really become a very symbiotic process at Adobe, and I suspect that's happening at a lot of other companies.
You know, the one thing that I see happening, which I think is a wonderful advancement in the industry, and being a CMO as long as you have, you will know intuitively where this begun to change, is the relationship between the CMO and the CIO. Yeah. And the close partnership that has allowed both of those positions to have a more powerful seat at the executive table.
Yeah, so I think, and everybody always asks about the CMO-CIO relationship, but I think when I first got to Adobe, we were like the lowest on the totem pole of people that IT wanted to support. Like we were not perceived to be, you know, demand generating or revenue generating, and so we got zero attention. But when we started to build the e-commerce engine and the capability to know the customers so closely, then we got a lot of attention from IT. And now, of course, I mean, we're like this. You can't do anything without having IT and the infrastructure to support what we're doing. They built the data platform for us with our specifications and the product team specifications. So it's like, you know, one of the most critical relationships.
Yeah, without question. I see that across our client base as marketing is proving the value of demand generation, as you noted. So a bit of a humble brag, I admit, but Dentsu is so proud to be one of Adobe's top partners. And just last week, we were announced Merkle won the 2020 Delivery Quality Enterprise Solution Partner Award, and Digital Pie won the 2020 Emerging Partner of the Year Award. And my question is—
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you on behalf of a large and very dedicated team to our clients that are working specifically on your installations. My question is around, in this moment, how do you see, and this either your own work with partners or how you're seeing other partners engage, how do you see this moment of shelter in place actually being an opportunity to advance relationships?
Well, the first thing I would say is people still want to connect, and they want to connect, I think, even more frequently than in the past. And so your clients, and I'm positive, want to talk to you a lot more in some cases than they did previously. They want to understand how they can pivot even more aggressively to digital. They want to understand what people in their categories are doing. I mean, we have been getting so many incoming inquiries, for instance, about how did you do your digital summit? We do conferences and events every year, but we have no idea how to do that. Can you document it for us? Can you give it to us? I think there's a huge opportunity for agencies of all sorts to really help clients do things that they weren't doing before. And you guys have those relationships. I mean, you have deep relationships, loyal, longstanding, trusted relationships. And I think there's so much need from a client perspective to help.
Yeah, you know, the one thing we started hosting last week, we had another one today, which is so simple, but we realized that the clients most want to talk to each other. They want to understand, to your point, how did you do the virtual summit? How quickly are you seeing Asia rebound since they're ahead of us on this? And what are some of the watch outs as people come back to work? And then if there's a relapse, what are they seeing in their business? We did a session again last week and another one today where clients are just sharing their own learnings. We're simply moderating the conversation, but just to your point, the opportunity to have more engagement and to really hear from one another, even if they're just different industries, there's always takeaways that are pretty consistent in terms of consumer behavior that we're finding really valuable.
Yeah, and I think industry by industry, and because you represent, you know, a breadth of industries, there are different needs. If you're in an industry that's being severely impacted, you need a certain amount of counsel in that regard. Like, how are you reaching out if you're a hotel chain or an airline? You know, I've been getting so many emails from travel companies that I work with, and those, you know, really require a lot of empathy in a way that you've never communicated before.
I've also seen some brands do some really interesting creative on TV where they've altered their message to be one that's that is empathetic. It's empathetic to the moment we're living in. I saw one that was specific to pets and the fact that your pet doesn't know why you're home. He's just glad you are. It was
So
happy.
It's
Great.
My
It's
pet's
great
so
creative
happy.
work. Yeah, so happy. They're all so happy. Our children are less happy potentially.
Yeah.
So tell us about what you think the lasting change or changes might be as a result of our current environment.
I can't believe it's happening, just to be honest. And so I've thought a lot about how I personally will change, because I don't even think it's just the environment. I think every one of us will personally change and be much more reflective about, you know, all the privileges and benefits that we have in the normal world. I think from a business perspective, work from home, I think in some companies was never encouraged because there was a fear there'd be a loss of productivity. I think that's hogwash. I think the level of productivity is off the charts. And yeah, I think part of it is we really want to, you know, do well in this environment. We don't want the economy to tank. So there's a real desire to be productive and successful. I think people will just appreciate things more. People will be more generous. I've seen so much generosity around me. You know, we have a neighborhood, little community kind of next door, and there are elderly people in our community. I've talked to a couple of them, got them to use Instacart, help them figure out how to order food from DoorDash. These small kindnesses are so important. And we are doing a little teddy bear bear hunt in our neighborhood. 161 homes have teddy bears in the windows, so that when little kids are going on their walks, they see them and they're counting them. And
They're finding them.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just a lot of kindness, generosity, and hopefully that will be lasting.
So Anne, what is the one question I didn't ask that I should have that you think is really important to share at this time?
What more can we do? I think everyone needs to look for what else they can do during this time. There are a lot of people in need, and there are small ways and large ways that we can all contribute, both personally and professionally.
I think that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you so much again for being here today.
Thank you for asking me. It's great to see you.
You too.
Okay, big thank you to Anne and Jackie for your time. A lot of key messages to take away there. And apologies to those of you who sent messages. I didn't realize that I was stuck in the corner. So luckily, you're going to get a break from me, and we are going to kick off the second segment of our session today. For those of you who may just be joining, the next segment is going to be the Dentsu Rewind live panel discussion. Today's moderator is Adam Lavelle. He's the former CMO of Merkle and head of solutions for Dentsu Aegis Network Americas, and now happy to say my partner in crime as the Chief Solutions Officer for Global Tech Alliances at Dentsu. So Adam, take it away.
So much appreciated. So I thought that was a really great conversation between Jackie Kelly and Ann Lunas from Adobe. I really liked her last question at the end, which is, what more can we do? I think that's a great sentiment for the for the times. So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining our wonderful experiment. Hope you enjoyed that part of the presentation, and now we'll get into this lovely panel conversation. So with me, I have 5 amazing experts from across the dentsu network. I'll introduce each of them as we go through this. But as Kellyanne mentioned, the Adobe Summit really for 2020 broke out into a number of pretty interesting and important tracks of content, innovation, data, insights, and identity, content, journeys, commerce, and B2B marketing automation, which we'll talk about, and which we talk about as B2Me in just a moment. So with that, what I wanted to do was just spend a few minutes with each of our experts and really try to give you a sense of the highlights of the many, many hours of content. I think there's somewhere around 100 or so hours of content available on demand from the Adobe Summit. It's a lot of content to sort of get through. And we wanted to make sure that we hit on some of the highlights from that and really gave you a quick sense in about 30 minutes of what our point of view is and what we saw from the summit. We'll end this after that 30 minutes with a little bit of a Q&A. So if you hear things throughout the portion of the panel and you've got questions, certainly throw those up. We'll be moderating those, and we'll try to take some of those and answer some of those at the end of the 30 minutes. So with that, we'll dive in. First up amongst our incredibly talented individuals is a good friend of mine, Jeff Tan, who heads up innovation for Dentsu in the Americas. Jeff, how you doing?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Adam. Glad to be here.
Excellent. You got some nice art behind you. It looks very beautiful. Very California vibe going. I like it. It's good. So I thought we'd start with you because the topic of innovation it permeates sort of everything, but it's also kind of its own thing sometimes. And one of the things I think that we heard from Ann and Jackie, but I wanted to get your take, was, the Adobe Summit is a big event normally, and this was a pretty big effort on their part to take what is a 25 to 40,000 person physical event and make it into a virtual event online and on demand. I just wanted to get a sense from you of going through the content and experiencing it, what you felt some of the pros and cons were, and how you thought it works as a summit.
Yeah, that's a great question. First up, I want to say, I thought the entire virtual summit was brilliantly executed. And just as an aside, after we get out of this lockdown and pandemic, I think a lot of conferences and events organizers are really going to start questioning how can they actually start scaling, and what does the new normal look like. Anne just said, I wrote down a stat that she just said a few minutes ago, there were 120,000 people, which is phenomenal. So if you think about the cost benefit analysis there, it's in the return on investment they would have had just from scaling their message from, as you said, 25,000 plus normally to in-person to now over 120,000, and that content obviously still lives on and is going to be shared. I think that a lot of event organizers will relook at what their normal ways of working are. But to answer your question, you said what were some of the advantages and disadvantages of running it virtually? I think probably the biggest advantage was because it was a controlled environment, they were able to produce phenomenally high quality footage. And there was this level of intimacy I found by listening to the speakers and the panelists at the summit. Sometimes you're literally looking into the living rooms, or in one case, even the bedrooms of some of their speakers. So I thought that was great. And you feel a connection. I definitely felt a one-to-one connection with the speakers there, even though it was one to many. But probably the biggest disadvantage, which was expected, is compared to a live event, you don't get that opportunity to network. You don't get that serendipity of casual bumping into people and meetings. But I thought it was just brilliant. I thought it was brilliantly done. And I also just wanted to say at the end, when Anne and Jackie were talking about what needs to be done to drive innovation, I love what Anne said, where it's technology is just the first thing, okay? Often we think that innovation is technology or is the shiny object, which I hate that phrase, or is a magic pill that you swallow once a year just to solve all of your problems or get some headlines. That's not innovation, right? Innovation is much, much more. And Anne said innovation, they see it as people and process. I would go one step further and say that innovation is definitely talent, definitely process, definitely culture, but it's also much more than that. It's having leadership, steering that. It's having the right systems and the right structure to develop an innovation ecosystem, and that all starts with mindset. It all starts from within, that curiosity, that proactivity, and that willingness to question what I call inherited limitations, to question that and just push the boundaries forward. So sorry, I've gone off on a slight tangent there, but I think to go back to your original question, it was brilliantly done, and I was impressed.
Good. I count on you to go on those tangents. Those are important, and I think it's important for our listeners, our watchers, to get a sense of when we talk about innovation, what we mean, because it is more than just product. I'm going to shift a little bit though to product, because the way that Adobe approached some of their innovation in the summit was specific around a topic they call sneaks, which is sort of sneak peeks into things that are coming out of their labs, things that they're working on, things that are not necessarily in product today or in production, but things that are possible and can be done. And so they demoed some of those things. And I know there were a half dozen or so different sneaks, one about clothes swap and virtual modeling, one called Snippets. I think that's one that was pretty interesting. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. And I guess we've only probably got time just to dive into one a little bit. Project Snippets was pretty cool. It was a technology which, to fit Anne's sentence a second ago, technology starts there, but you need the people in the process to really get behind this innovation to make it work. But basically, Project Snippets, which they're calling it, which comes straight out of the Adobe lab. So it's not even a product that you can use just yet, but hopefully it will be. But basically, it provides the ability for any brand to tailor and target content directly at specific segments, which Adobe call personas, and it's all driven by AI and machine learning. So I'll give you just a quick example. I'm from Australia, in case you can't tell. So imagine the Tourism Australia website, where at the moment it is a pretty generic experience. Like, so you just say, Adam, you're a luxury foodie, and me, I'm a music lover and a beer drinker, which I am. And the experience you would get at the Tourism Australia website right now would be pretty exact stock standard as what I would get. But with this Project Snippets innovation, what Tourism Australia would be able to do is use AI to predict what sort of content that you as a luxury foodie would like versus me as a beer lover and a live music lover, based on the library of Tourism Australia's content, and then show, with approval obviously, show you, at a section of the website for things to do, you would see content that would say something like the best Michelin star restaurants in Sydney. Whereas I, under things to do, would see something that says Sydney's best live pubs that play music, or Sydney's best live band venues. So I thought that was actually pretty cool. Look, is it going to change the world? Well, it could be if every brand marketer and digital strategist got behind it, learned how to use it. So again, it comes down to the people behind this and the process. But I love the fact that, look, from the demo, from that Sneaks talk, it looked pretty intuitive and simple, which Adobe products usually are.
Great. And I think some of that intersection of content with Sensei and AI, there's a lot going on. We're going to talk a little bit with Sunil about that in just a few minutes when we get to content. But okay, great, much appreciated. Thank you, Jeff. We're going to try to stay on time here. So thanks for that. We're going to jump from innovation into an area where we know there's a lot of innovation going on. This is around data, insights, and identity. Joining me for that part of the conversation is Kelly Ledger, who is part of the leadership team of Mercury, the identity resolution solution that dentsu and Merkle, part of dentsu, have. So Kelly, you there?
Good morning, afternoon. I have no idea what time it is, but good morning.
Excellent. Coming to us also from your home office. I love it. Thank
Yes.
you.
If my toddler screams in the background, I apologize.
No problem. If the door opens and a kid comes running in screaming, I think everybody's very understanding of these
It's life right now.
lifetimes. So, hey, when it comes to data, we're almost always talking about customer data in this world. So there was a lot going on at Adobe Summit this year. The products like Adobe Audience Manager have been in market for a while. Adobe Experience Platform has been released over the past year and is starting to pick up steam. And a big part of what those platforms do is help brands identify specific people and then create unique experiences for those people. But we're at a kind of pivot point, I think, in the journey around customer data. I know one of the sessions was about a cookieless future. Can you just talk a little bit about kind of where we are and the beginnings of what we're starting to see when it comes to customer data and identity?
Sure. So if the folks on the phone or on the webinar don't know, Google made an announcement about 2 months ago that they will deprecate third-party cookies in roughly, I think it's T-minus 19 months maybe from now. And so that's sort of sending folks into a bit of a panic on how they will understand more about audience as they sort of target in this digital world that we all live in now. Over the last 2 years, with the browsers really leading the charge around ITP and sort of audience deprecation, I guess, not recognizing cookie across the browser. I think really the industry has been pushing into this world of what's next. When Google sort of made this announcement a couple of months ago, it sort of became extremely real that within a matter of months, we will have some interoperability issues just from an audience understanding, and then obviously at the back end, a data and measurement attribution perspective as the ecosystem becomes more siloed, so to speak. So really that's sort of the current climate. I think what we're hearing from clients and what I saw resonate in Adobe was really leaning into what is this future state, what will it be, and how do we come together and really not only sort of understand what's at the table, what different organizations are proposing, but how do we sort of lean in from Adobe's perspective and sort of shape that proposal and shape what the future will be in this new cookieless world. So I think that's really, sort of what I gathered from the Adobe Summit and where we're at right now.
Yeah. So I know this always gets very technical very quickly, but this idea that the cookie has been in the digital ecosystem, the currency for identity, and it hasn't been a terribly good one because it was never really built to do that. And we're really moving away from that to more of a persistent ID. And it does create a lot of new language. So one of the terms that keeps popping up is the private graph. And then there's also things like the co-op graph, which is sort of third-party data coming in, and the private graph I think is really first-party data. So it's a brand having its own graph of identity around its own customer. So it's new language to be talked about, new technology to understand, but this idea is generally around moving to a higher state of maturity and what would I call it? Sort of validation that the person is the person. I think that seems
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear Adobe's perspective on having both graphs be a part of AEP's identity solution. So I think most people understand that, your first party data is extremely valuable. And I think the way in which we've been looking at first party data has been historically siloed, and offline data sits over here and online data you bring to a graph to get it to an endpoint or you pipe it into your platform, maybe it's AAM, via your email hash or an email list, right? I think what's interesting now in the way in which AEP talked about identity was bringing both of those sort of siloed worlds together for that private graph, for that first party to really understand not only who's coming to your site, their interactions, data behind them, but also bringing in that ingestion of your sort of offline customer file, making those two work together at, you know, the highest level of fidelity, and then using AEP for other data stitching back to that first party. So that was really interesting to me because I live in a world of known person. We believe that really your person ID should be at a known level. So there has to be some data point, whether it's a postal address or an email hash. So that was exciting for me to see that AEP is really leaning into this world and bringing sort of those two sort of disparate siloed data sets together as the private graph. What was also interesting was to hear about the cooperative graph, which is about 100 contributors within AEP that contribute. I'm guessing it's third-party links, probably some second-party cooperative instances, all different sites of data and insights that are pushing into this sort of learning machine known as the cooperative graph that you can sort of use and understand as a graph component, let's say. But really, I thought the most valuable thing was the one sort of having both within AEP, the sort of choose your own adventure. And then I think two, being able to say to your clients, if you're an AEP client, hey, let's bring all of your data together, whether it's offline, online, and let's create this sort of massive private graph. So I think it's a really interesting capability they're bringing into AEP.
I did see a lot around security and privacy as well. So I think, you know, there's sort of a parallel tracks here around a continued push into people-based marketing, but in the context of proper regulatory environment and participating in that. It's also clear there's not, quote, a standard,
Right.
really. And I think one of the things that you and I had talked about was Adobe's gotten very involved in the broader community around this. Can you just talk to that for a second?
Yeah, I watched their cookieless world breakout, which was really interesting. I vouch for that. I think everyone should watch it. And they the speaker mentioned that they were monitoring and or involved in 54 industry organizations and proposals that are currently shaping the future of this cookieless world. So my key takeaway was there's 54 industry orgs and regulations. Like I had no clue. I thought maybe there was like 10 at best. So I'm gonna look that up. And number two, the fact that Adobe, I think, who has been more of a neutral party in the past, is now saying we're going to lean into this a bit more because we need to weigh in here of what that identity currency looks like as we move into the sort of post-cookieless, you know, apocalypse, so to speak, like what that actually looks like and how the interoperability works across systems. And I think that's really important that they're doing that. Not only on behalf of their clients, but on behalf of industries. We need large MarTech platforms to lean into this world because I think, you know, the more folks that are involved in this, the more like all boats rise to the top, right? Like the level of understanding, the level of precision against identity, and that level of consistency, which I think we've sort of missed in the cookie world, right? To your point of like, has it been the best sense of identity? I think if we now move into this post-cookieless world, that we all have to sort of get in the boat together to make sure that this operates well and we're doing the best that we can on behalf of our clients, right?
Yep. Good. So we could spend a long time on this topic. I know it's a big one. It's an important one for a lot of marketers, but I'm going to keep pace. So thank you. I appreciate the time and the perspective. A lot of good sessions on that topic, and certainly things that people should go look at. I'm a big fan of saying when you know who you're going to market to, then you can figure out what you want to put in front of them, and that begins to raise the subject of content. So to talk with us today about content is Sunil Kapadia. Sunil, hello.
Hi, Adam. How are you?
Excellent. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it.
Of course.
So Sunil's been leading a lot of dentsu's content initiatives. and continuing to help us throughout the organization. So I know you took some time and went through all of the content track related, the content, as I call it. And I know there was a lot going on, and this was a particularly exciting summit for some of the things that are going on relative to content. I think any marketer, the minute they have to think about how they have to behave like a publisher and produce lots of content, it's difficult when they're in the business of doing any other thing, manufacturing things, providing other services, in the finance industry or the retail industry. Being a content creator is a lot of effort. But I think you saw some things in this summit that are beginning to change that landscape and really provide brands and marketers with some new opportunities. Can you just talk a little bit about some of what you saw?
Yeah, for sure. Look, so, one of the most pressing problems that marketers face today is this need to quickly create, manage, and deploy massive amounts of content for different devices, for different platforms, for different channels, for different markets, in the face of personalization, and being able to do that at scale. And so at one point, Adobe presented a stat that I found really compelling, which is 71% of marketers saying that they need to produce 10x more content. Like, that's a massive problem, right? And I thought Adobe presented a really compelling vision for how to solve that problem. Like the promise, I think Ann touched on it, the promise of marketing clouds in general, or enterprise clouds in general, is providing this full stack that solves end-to-end marketer needs, from creative to media to commerce to CRM. And one of the things that's really important in that mission is the wiring between the different components of that stack. And so that whole phrase, design for brilliance, wire for intelligence, I really love it. I think it speaks volumes about what's needed. So there were a few things that really impressed me about sort of the overall vision that Adobe put forward this year. Number one is kind of just the way they presented the overall architecture. So AEP being the backbone, and then services on top of that, and then the individual cloud applications on top of that. Number two was this idea of AEM as a cloud service. And so, I think that's a big step forward in enabling agility, flexible scale, and also consistency. And then what we were talking about, which is the pipes and the intelligence that they've built between the cloud applications, which I think really enables what we call content ROI, which is value realization from content effectively.
Yeah, so I think that's a fascinating topic. We, when we were preparing for this, we talked a little bit about this. Now this idea that this particular piece of content is good or bad, or performs or doesn't, isn't an absolute judgment anymore. It's a question of a piece of content in a particular context and whether or not it performs. So this notion of content velocity is a phrase that showed up a lot. Can you just talk a little bit about what it means to, what does that mean, content velocity?
Yeah. So look, if content ROI is about connecting the time and effort that goes in producing that 10x more content to the sales based on that content, then content velocity is like the speed at which you can make that workflow happen. And so that's the driver of that. And I thought, in practice, what that really means is connecting the work of content creators to the work of experienced designers to the work of merchants who are providing the e-commerce layer. And I think there was a very compelling session that Adobe put forward around connecting content and commerce. And they've effectively just built the pipes between Creative Cloud, AEM, as AEM assets, and then Magento and Commerce Cloud to make that workflow real-time, seamless, and also provide a layer of intelligence on top of it in terms of smart tagging and smart cropping. And so it was a really compelling example put forward by Helly Hansen about how they've used this system to release their new line of jackets, their Leave Aloft jackets. And I thought it was a really, like, the demo was spot on. It just showed how easy it is to go from content to deployment.
I mean, I find this, in very simple, sort of non-technical terms, what I find amazing is it used to be you would create content in Experience Manager that would be for the website and maybe for the mobile app. And then you would create other content in the email platform for emails. And then you would create product content in the commerce platform for commerce. And the idea that, as you say, you're really shrinking the supply chain and you're connecting content creators and the manufacturing of content out to all the different activation channels. It just makes all of that way better, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there was this concept that they introduced of content fragments, which ladder up to experience fragments, which then ladder up to actual digital or e-commerce experiences. And I think that's such a great way of looking at it, because to your point, one piece of content can be reused in lots of different contexts. And so rather than having this sort of kludgy siloed workflow where individual people are creating content for individual channels, this sort of creates a base layer. Like the concept of it creates a base layer. And the other thing that they did that I thought was really neat was they introduced a new role, which is the role of content architect. And so if you think about the content itself or the assets itself being the car and Magento being the garage, and then the metadata being the fuel, the content architect is the driver and the person that brings that entire content supply chain together and manages it. And I think we're going to see more and more of that being an important role going forward.
Super. I think it's probably a good idea to end on a metaphor. And I want to keep time going, keep us going on time. So lots of content around content, and certainly a lot more available on demand from the summit. But a good top line perspective. I know it was an exciting time, and there's a lot of stuff there. The maturity around content and content distribution and manufacturing, pretty impressive. So Sunil, thank you. Really appreciate the time. We're going to pivot from, we know who we're marketing to, we know what we're going to put in front of them. Well, then we have to orchestrate the specific moments, events, and parts of a customer journey, of a set of experiences. To do that and to talk about that, I brought along Deepak Naresti. How are you, Deepak?
How's it going? Hi, everyone in the virtual world.
Yep, excellent. That's a nice, cozy little backstop you got there. That looks soft, very comfortable. So thanks for being here with us. Deepak heads up a big portion of our Adobe Solutions team, works with me a lot, so happy to see you. I know I think you were probably singularly the most passionate and excited person, having gone through the content from the summit. You were sort of busting at the seams about a lot of the new things that you saw. Let's talk for just a moment. Let's ground everyone. When we're talking about orchestrating journeys or orchestrating experiences, what do we mean in general? And then what did you see that got you so excited from the summit?
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't like new tools? Adobe released a whole bunch of new tools. Customer journey management is I think, the first time where Adobe took a API-driven service model and is going to integrate it into all of its products, right? And so with Adobe Campaign and Marketo Engage, I'm now able to create this event-based journey for most of my, anything I can dream up. I can now create-
You said event-based, and that's really important. So I think when you talk about platforms that do email and do messaging like Campaign or like Marketo, those are very different approaches. And from the ground up here, you said event-based. That's a whole new take.
Yeah. When you look at your traditional email campaigns, you take a list, you create a template or email, and then you send that out, right? And it is a little bit personalized because the lists are very curated. With this journey orchestration platform that they're building, that's built on top of real-time customer profiles, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, you are now able to listen to any event. So if I walked into a store, I'm listening to a podcast because I'm listening to, I have all of the analytics telling me what's happening with my customers. When that event occurs, I could trigger a journey that I've dreamt up, right? Me as a marketer or an agency or the brand itself, these events could now do something for me. So some of the things that the customer journey platform is exposing right off the bat, I have access to sharing audiences, attributes about the audiences, I could create offers and manage decisions. I could do geo-based location events and share assets across these things, right? So because it's plugged into the rest of the ecosystem, AEM could be triggered, Adobe Campaign could be triggered, Marketo Engage could be triggered. And if I integrate it into my mobile app, any of the notifications and even experiences on my mobile app could be triggered.
So I think this really changes the mindset, and Jeff talked about this at the beginning, innovation is a mindset. It changes the mindset about, I have this persona and they follow this journey and it's linear or it's fixed. It really creates just a mammoth amount of permutations, but it does give marketers the ability to market, in effect, in real time and make decisions in the moment to try to make experiences that are more relevant. That really opens up the field, doesn't it? Yeah,
and I think when you look at the types of journeys, yes, we as marketers are going to create an idea, a dream of what that journey is going to look like. But the technology with Sensei behind it and all the data that's piped into it, think about all the micro interactions that could be created, right? And we'll set up rules and define some of these things, but as the system gets going, it's just going to open up the entire world to what's possible with micro interactions, micro segments of data, leading to content at scale. I mean, without these platforms and the Adobe ecosystem, how are we going to do content at scale?
Yeah, I mean, it does, I think, immediately evoke questions about how you operate it and how you manage it. It does sound, I don't want to make it sound scary. Certainly, you mentioned Sensei and machine learning. Some of that does some of the heavy lifting for you in terms of a lot of those micro moments, but it does give you the ability to really start, as you keep saying, dream up some new scenarios. I know you were talking about going to, when we get a chance to start going back to large gatherings, going to stadiums and having all sorts of adaptive journeys and experiences happen.
Yeah, in about 2 months, we're all going to go stir crazy. So I'm glad these technologies are out here to help us, dentsu, Merkle, everybody, to have a whole set of new tools in our toolbox to be able to create these experiences.
Yeah,
I encourage everyone to check out some of the sessions that I saw on journey management. It's really cool stuff, cutting edge.
Yeah, the particular thing was this service or tool, which is journey orchestration, which does sit on top of experience platform. But as you said, it can show up in many of the other products, right?
Yeah, because Adobe built the whole platform from the ground up and really focused on it being driven through APIs. The APIs expose screens, and the screens are inside Campaign, inside of Marketo, as well as in, they're going to expose it in Target, and they're going to expose it in AEM. So over the coming year, you're going to see all of these buttons and links showing up, and you're thinking that you're inside of AEM, but you're calling up an audience that's inside of AEP. You're calling up a journey that was inside of the journey orchestration tool. It's all going to be integrated and seamless, hopefully.
Okay. Excellent. Cool. Well, we're going to try to wrap up with one more topic. So Deepak, thank you for the time. I know there's a lot around that. We covered it pretty quickly. So we know who we're marketing to. We know what we're putting in front of them. We can orchestrate these real-time micro moments and events. At some point, every business wants to ultimately get somebody to buy something. So it's probably a good idea that we talk about being able to interact and then be able to transact. And so to do that, I've asked our final expert to join me, John Riley. John, you there?
I am right here.
Excellent. You're looking very mayoral almost.
Oh, thank you. I have a side gig with my city, and I'm doing that as well as this today.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Well, I'll say thank you for your service to your town. Then that's super, very, very patriotic behind you. So look, thanks for being with us. John heads up commerce strategy for Dentsu and Dentsu Isobar. And I specifically say commerce strategy because it's not e-commerce strategy, it's commerce strategy. There was a lot of commerce-related conversation, topic, and content at the summit this year, and some pretty good stuff, I think, coming. What got you excited?
Well, the integration of artificial intelligence and commerce is really coming into its own now. And Adobe's played with that for a long time with their Sensei project. You mentioned that earlier in the presentation. But the integration of the ability to use artificial intelligence at every step of the transaction, be it from leads, from journeys to the commerce itself, from marketing. It's bringing everything together and giving brands and retailers the ability to make real decisions in real time without having to use human intervention, which is the slow part. We're slow, we can't act quickly. The ability for brands and retailers to be able to pivot instantly and get the customer at every point of the journey through the transaction is critical. And Adobe gets that, and they're really starting to bring everything together. So that was what got me super excited.
Nice. We've been talking a lot about new terms that keep showing up. One of the terms is headless commerce. Explain that and explain what that means for marketers.
Well, I mean, of course, the old joke of, anything in the cloud is just a computer under somebody else's desk. But in this case, in the cloud means that it's scalable. And when I'm a retailer or a brand and I have a digital commerce experience that I'm selling, the ability to be able to pivot from doing 50 sales an hour to 850 sales a minute, that's huge. And when you're using expandable technology in the cloud, headless commerce, you can do that. And that's one of the very interesting things about Magento, and one of the reasons it's the leader in the one of the leaders in the commerce space, is it has that ability to scale that quickly. Of course, we're in a world now where almost overnight, every single transaction for every single brand and retailer had to go online. And a lot of brands and companies are struggling with that. So to have that ability to be able to just flip a switch and say, okay, we can expand this to now do 10,000 transactions an hour instead of 50, that's critical for businesses. And you just can't do that when you have a box under your desk running your commerce.
Yep. The other thing, we've been talking about all these sort of micro moments and interoperability and so on. One of the things here is, and I'll just, I'll make it about me for a moment, which I never do, never about me. But the idea that, okay, now I'm ready to shop. So now I will go to the shopping experience. That is fading away quickly. This idea of I can buy anywhere, however, whenever, in whatever way I want is increasingly becoming possible.
So very true. And we're just to the point where we don't go shopping anymore. We shop when we're doing other things. And thanks to this 5-inch piece of glass that we all carry in our pocket, we have the ability to interact with virtually any retailer, anytime, any place. And consumers demand that. I jokingly refer to that as the Amazonification of expectations. We expect to be able to get anything, anytime, anywhere. That's changed a little bit in the COVID world that we're existing in right now, in terms of shipping times and actual fulfillment, which is frankly a plus for every other retailer in the world, because now the bar has been lowered in terms of expectations for delivery. But the expectation of being able to do that any place is even higher. I should be able to buy anything from my house. And when I can't, I stop and think about that for a moment and maybe seek out another retailer who will offer that to me. So that end to end of, I want to be able to interact with any brand any way I want as a consumer, that's a call to action for brands and retailers, because a lot of brands and retailers are still stuck in somewhat siloed ways. And the joking way is we say, if we can sense when I've crossed a division, your user experience needs some help. So that's the new world that we live in, and the ability to be able to buy things anytime is what is the future. That's even going to become more prevalent as we get better technology, and I'll be able to take a picture of a chair on my phone and instantly be able to buy it. That technology is not far off.
Right. Well, and the all-important children, my 10 and 13-year-olds their whole world has changed now in not understanding how things don't show up within a day to 48 hours from when they want it. Good lessons for them, I think, is probably the right answer. So let's do one other little pivot here. John, stay with me. So for a long time, we've talked about B2C, and then we've talked about B2B. And at Dentsu, we've been talking about how it's neither of those things. It's really B to me. And so there is a lot of content at the summit, certainly off the backs of the Marketo acquisition that happened over the last 18 months, and that platform and the marketing automation that was originally built out for a B2B context. Those walls have come down a little bit. And so just talk to me a little bit when we talk about what has been classically viewed as a B2B world, even that's changing.
So I can do that in two ways. One, specifically with Adobe. Adobe has been breaking down a lot of those walls, as you put it, between B2B and B2C within its own systems to that uses, both groups use the same software. There are order management and order fulfillment systems that Adobe has integrated into Magento and Marketo to offer those services specifically to B2Bs. But to your point, there really isn't anything, and I really like the B to me expectation of we're all people. We all have expectations in our personal lives, as I mentioned earlier, about how things are supposed to work in terms of e-commerce and digital. And that doesn't stop when we go to work. I don't have a separate expectation level for when I deal with the company that does my floor scrubbers versus the company that sells me my paper towels, if that were possible in the current world, but nevertheless sells me my paper towels from Amazon. As a result, businesses are being pushed to create outstanding experiences, whether they're selling 100,000 carburetors or they're selling one book. And because we as consumers have that expectation, companies like Adobe are rising to that and offering services that are the same across the entire spectrum. So the B to me is we're all consumers, we're all people. It's the same person that's buying those huge commercial sales or those individual ones.
Yep, great. Cool. Well, John, thank you very, very much. Appreciate all the perspective. Appreciate all the perspective from all of our panelists. We tried to stay pretty close to time. I think we're a couple minutes over. I want to thank everyone who joined and participated. I want to thank everybody who came in and watched. Very much appreciate all of you coming and being part of our wonderful experiment and being part of our virtual panel. Hope everyone has a great day. Go to our website at dentsuaegis.com. There are deep dives on several of these topics. I have one-on-one interviews with pretty much everybody that was a panelist today. And also you can go to Adobe Summit and register. That content is free and all of that is on demand, 100+ hours worth of stuff. So thanks for coming. Everyone have a great day and stay safe. Take care.